risk issues, and then a bit later on, if we get time, we'll start talking about operational risk, and then next week we'll be doing more of the operational risk side. So from last week, as risk managers, can anyone remember one of the key things that the Basel Committee were recommending that we should do in any financial institution in terms of managing credit risk? Anybody remember? Without looking at all your notes.
Avoid concentration.
Say again?
Avoid concentration like in one sector.
Yeah, that's very good. That wasn't the main thing that I was looking for. What were they encouraging financial institutions to do? What were they encouraging them to do in terms of their credit, their loans and stuff?
Diversify?
Risk ratings is what I'm looking for. Yeah. Trying to do the credit risk ratings, yes?
Yes.
And that's what we started on. And we talked about the complexity of these ratings because they're not straightforward. Can you remember the two main elements to any type of credit risk rating? There are two main components. Do you remember what they were? Morning. What did we say were the two main aspects? We would look at the financials, yes?
Okay.
On one side, and then what did we say we look at on the other side?
Credit risk.
No, the credit risk contains these two elements that I'm trying to get at. There'll be financial risk.
And non-financial?
That's it, very good. Non-financial. And anyone remember the other name for that, in case you get the other name?
The qualitative or quantitative data?
Yes, quantitative and qualitative. And there's one more. For the non-financials, what do we sometimes call the non-financials? So it's not financial risk, it's what? Business risk, yeah? So you've done very well there. So try and, when you're thinking of credit risk, as a risk manager, and you're talking to the people who are managing the credit risk in the institution, they should have two major components that they're looking at. One will be the financial analysis, and the other will be the non-financial analysis. And then we also call these, as you said, quantitative for the financials and qualitative for the non-financials. And we sometimes call the non-financials business risk. And then we discussed how difficult these are, because getting the financials, getting the mathematics is quite difficult to start with. But then the other side, I think the other side is more difficult because it calls for subjective judgments, doesn't it? It's what your opinion is of the management of the business. It's your opinion, on the products. It's your opinion on competition and things like that. So it's quite a difficult topic. So then what we did was we talked a little bit about scorecards on consumer credit or personal credit. And again, we saw there are two sides to this, the financial side and the behavior side, which is like the non-financials. And then we moved on to starting to talk about businesses. And this is where we got up to. We got up to the Cable Beach Hotel, remember?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you can find the Cable Beach Hotel, that's where we're going to start from this morning. Now what we did with the Cable Beach Hotel was I said, don't worry too much about the mathematics at this stage, and we're going to go on to that in a few minutes. But what we began with was looking at the non-financial side, didn't we? We looked at the non-financials using what technique did we use? What framework did we use? to start the discussions.
SWOT.
Yeah, SWOT. SWOT is very popular business risk analysis tool. So again, if I was trying to forecast questions, you might well get a question on, some type of non-financial tool in the credit risk, and you can think of SWOT analysis. And SWOT stands for?
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
That's it. Strengths and weaknesses are looking at internal aspects of the business, like an internal audit of the business. And then opportunities and threats, we're looking at external factors, and we sometimes call these the macro factors, the external factors of opportunities and threats. Now, many years ago, when I first was working in credit, to be quite honest with you, we didn't pay much attention at all to the opportunities and threats. Why? Because businesses were much more confined to their own little space, all those years ago. But of course, the world's changed dramatically. Businesses are more transportable. Businesses compete a lot more in different countries, don't they? And then, of course, we've seen the advent of the internet. So all of these things has made those external factors, the opportunities and threats, more important in terms of our risk analysis than they used to be. Okay, so just trying to refresh our memory on the hotel. I kept my SWOT notes from last week, and we were debating that the location seemed good, based on the information we'd been given. And from reading the information, it looks as though the construction company have got considerable expertise, so that's the second paragraph on the first page. Considerable expertise in construction of deluxe hotels, so that's good. So, they're not just experienced in smaller hotels, but they're experienced in making these more deluxe hotels, which would be very important, for the quality of the work. And let's see, what else did we have? We discussed the site that it was on didn't have any record of flooding. And what about the people who are coordinating the project? What do we know about them?
That they're experienced?
Yes, because they're using an independent firm. They're quantity surveyors, aren't they? To monitor the construction on behalf of the bank, and the monthly reports will be monitored by a leading firm of accountants. So that all sounds pretty good. But then on the weakness side, what we only got as far as discussing one weakness, I seem to remember, and that was the management. The management were unknown, weren't they? We didn't have any information on the actual management of the hotel. So I've got that down as a weakness, management unknown. Anything under opportunities?
There's a demand for luxury hotels.
Yes, demand for this type of hotel, top end of the market, and good demand. And every time I come to Nassau, I'm always looking to see how many cruise ships are in. I can't do it. I've been doing that for 20 years now, and it does give us a slight indicator of how things are. I remember about a year and a half ago coming, and there's only one ship in, which is pretty bad news. Last time I was there, most days there were 3, 4 or 5 ships in, and we're so reliant, on the tourism side. So demand for this type of hotel would be an opportunity. What about threats to the hotel?
We had unknown storm damage.
That's it, very good. We had unknown storm damage aspects, so we had that there. And of course, an another main threat would be competition, wouldn't it?
Right.
Yeah, so we always need to put that down. Most businesses you look at from a risk perspective, you'll be thinking of competition and competition issues. Okay, so that was quite a good start on the SWOT analysis. And then there was something that we decided was like a major threat, and that's in the third paragraph under the project, still on the first page. Remember, the developer's been granted a lease to the land by the government for a 20-year period, so that sounds pretty good, with a further 4 10-year periods of renewal, the initial rent so-and-so, so-and-so, but then we came to the problem. The lessor, which is the government, has the right to cancel the interest should the land be required for public purpose. However, 2 years' notice must be given, together with compensation. So this is a major problem for us. The fact that, from a risk perspective, if our bank got involved in participating in the finance, this fact that the lease can be broken is a terrible thing, isn't it? It's a terrible risk. So that's a major risk. Now, it does say that compensation would be paid. What's the problem with that?
Unknown.
It's unknown.
Yeah, it's unknown. So again, a weakness, I would suggest, a weakness is unknown compensation, and the threat, so these things are difficult to place. Sometimes you can place them in a couple of places, sometimes you don't necessarily agree with a colleague. It really doesn't matter, because SWOT is just meant, to help us bring the facts out, so there's no right and wrong answer to these things. But I would suggest unknown compensation is a weakness, and the breakage of the lease, yes, it's a weakness, but it's also a very significant threat to the project. So I would be inclined to put the breakage of the lease down as a threat, and I'd put the unknown compensation down as a weakness. But again, it's a matter of opinion. Okay, well that starts to give us a flavour for this. What about the staff who are going to work in this hotel when the hotel is completed? Do we know anything about them?
No.
No.
No? So we didn't see anything about, qualified staff and staff recruitment. We didn't see anything about that. So that's a weakness under the project. And then we did see a lot of figures. Now, if you look towards the bottom of the second page, we started to look at this, and we were just focusing to begin with on the first year. So first year occupancy 55%, and the average room rate $195. Now we discussed this just briefly last week on the basis that quite often in projects, you'll find some things in the projects are easier to get an idea of from a risk perspective than others. And I think we all agreed that the room rate at $195 was easier for us to kind of pinpoint, wasn't it? Because, we have experience of what other hotels are charging, and from your experience there in Nassau, what different grades of hotels are charging. So I think we agreed last week that $195 for this class of hotel would be okay. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a few sleeps since then, so you'd have to keep me right if I'm wrong. So 195 seemed a reasonable figure. But the tricky one is the occupancy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's quite general, most countries that are working, occupancy is quite difficult to verify. And I did suggest that we could try and check with the tourist board, see what type of statistical data they have. Some countries have more data than others. Now we're lucky in the UK, the English Tourist Board, for example, they collect lots of data on visitors to the UK and where they stay. The various hotels make returns to the Tourist Board and then they collate the data. But 55% occupancy, you need to take a view on that from a risk perspective. What do you think, by way of instinct? Do you think 55% is quite high or low or medium? What do you think?
That's low. 55% is low, I think.
It's low, yes?
Mhm.
So you think we would do better than that? Good. So what we're doing now is what the Management Committee again were encouraging us, to try and do some stress testing. Stress testing, is just like some people call it scenario analysis, and some people call it simply what if, what if analysis. So two key sensitivities in this project would be the occupancy level and the room rate. So what we're saying from a stress test perspective is, the occupancy rate, we could flex that further downwards or we could flex it upwards, and the room rate, we could do similar. Now this is where someone, who's very good on the computer can be usefully employed here, because they can build up a spreadsheet and we can put these two key variables into the spreadsheet. I'll show you what I mean in a few minutes when we look at some of the other figures. And what we can do is just keep an eye on those two in year one, because we're going to focus to begin with on year one. So we've got occupancy 55%, so you might want to highlight that, and the average room rate at 195, so if you highlight those, and then we're going to move forward. We'll come back to the valuations later. What we're going to do now is move forward to some of the mathematics. Now, the first page of mathematics, you see, is over a period of 13 months of construction, and there's always a danger when you get lots and lots of figures, to overlook some of the obvious things. Now, one of the most obvious things in this is the construction period. So what's the construction period? They're showing this on this first page. It's right at the top there.
The 5 months?
Yeah, 13 months, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
So what they're saying is, by 13 months, the construction should be over, the loan's fully drawn down there, and the equity contribution went in months 1, 2, and 3. So their expectation is that this 253 bedroom, was it 4-star or 5-star?
5.
5-star hotel is going to be built. I mean, that seems to me an incredibly short period of time. Unless it's the Chinese workers who are building, down here on the beach at the moment. They might do it, but I've never seen, Caribbean construction quite that fast, and that's not being disrespectful, to people working in the Caribbean. It would be the same in the UK. In the UK, it would be impossible to build 253 bedroom, 5-star hotel in 13 months. So the first thing we want to question as risk managers, so you need to write that on that page. And again, last week we discussed the fact that you didn't have detailed plans. And here is a very important point, it's details of the construction period, the various workflow plans lying behind this. Now, it's not going to be your job, because you're the risk manager, okay? You're not the credit manager. All we're doing is we're looking at this from a risk management perspective, and feeding in our suggestions from a risk viewpoint. So the first thing, construction period looks very short. Now, when we come to look at some mathematics, this is where it's quite difficult Why? Because this is a new project. So if you have an existing business, for example, if we're looking at the Atlantis Hotel, or we're looking at the Hilton Hotel, or we're looking at the Sheraton Hotel as it was, we're going to have years of financial statements, so we can work, quite a lot of business performance ratios. But the problem with new projects is, from a risk perspective, is trying to think, well, what sort of performance ratios can we use? Can you think of any type of things that we could test from a mathematical viewpoint on a project like this? So we've already talked, good morning, we've already talked about the possibility of testing the occupancy and the room rate, but what other mathematics do you think we could test? Anything come to mind? So quite a tricky question for early in the morning. So let me give you a hint. We're still just staying on this construction page. So if you look to the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the total project cost, can't you? Approximately 43 million US dollars. Yes?
Yes.
So highlight that. So that's the total. That's not the total debt or the total equity, that's the total project. So what you're looking at is 253 bedroom, 5-star hotel, and the total cost is going to be 43 million US dollars. And you can see how this is going to be financed, because if you look at the line above, there's the loan balance, look, 29,999. So we're calling that 30 million US dollar loan, yes? So that's the loan syndication, that's the maximum that the participants will be putting in, not individually, but collectively, yes? The bank's coming together to syndicate this, so $30 million loan. So the balance, of course, should be the equity, shouldn't it? So 30 million debt, away from 43 million project cost, we should be getting 13 million equity coming in, approximately, from the developers. So if we move up to the equity line there, you can see there's 5 million, 5.7, that gives us approximately 10.7, and then another 2.4. So that's just over 13 million, isn't it? Yes? Okay, now, so I've given you a clue. I've given you the equity figure, I've given you the total project cost, and I've given you the debt figure. So any ideas what business ratio we could calculate to give us the initial startup financial risk? Anybody think of what we could work as a business calculation based on those figures? So you know the startup debt, you know the startup equity, and you know the startup project cost. What business ratio or what business calculation do you think we could make to give us an indication of the financial risk right at the beginning of this project?
Probably like a debt to equity ratio.
Yes, definitely, very, very good. Now this you can do on a very, very small startup business or a very big one like this one. It doesn't matter about the size, it's the relationship that's very important. So what we're talking about, if you write this down, on that page is startup debt to equity or startup gearing, yeah? Startup gearing ratio. Now we have to be careful here because some organizations don't really do this correctly. Some organizations look at the debt relative to the project. Some organizations look at the equity relative to the project. But the lady who answered, she got it exactly right. What we're interested in is the relationship between the debt that's being asked for and the equity which, is the business people's risk capital, yes? So let's just do that calculation on the calculator or on your phone or whatever. So we're just going to do it based on those figures there. So what we've got is debt of 30 million. So if you put 30 into the calculator, so that's the debt. And we're going to divide it by the equity, which is approximately 13 million. And then we're going to multiply it by 100 to get it as a percentage, because experience shows us in discussion with business people, they're more comfortable with percentages than if I said to them, oh, the debt to equity is 2.3 to 1. What does that mean? Yeah? But if I say to the developers, look, just a minute, do you realize the startup debt to equity position in your project is 230%? Straight away to me that gives a signal that there's quite a lot of debt. Would you agree?
Agree.
Yeah, because anything over 100%, we tend to think psychologically, it sounds high, doesn't it? So that's what I'd always work on new businesses. Whether it's a small corner shop, store, or it's a small hotel, Mama's and Papa's hotel on the Family Islands, or it's this big 253 bedroom hotel costing $43 million, I'll still begin with this. Now there are very few, as we'll see, mathematical calculations we can make, so this is a good start. This is number one. So that's on the startup position. Now we're going to discuss the impact of that a little bit later on, but just for the moment, just keep a note of that figure. The debt to equity is 230%. And it's adverse because there's more debt than equity. And as risk managers, we know when there's more debt than equity, the business is going to have to perform well. Why? Because it's got to pay back the debt. Okay, now, thinking as risk managers again, thinking of going forward beyond this construction, beyond this startup construction risk position. Let's say the hotel is now opening. How will the debt be paid back? What will pay back the debt?
Profits from the hotel.
Say again?
I'm thinking it'd be profits from the hotel.
It's profits, but more correctly, it's what?
Room rates?
No, that's part of it.
Customers?
No, that's part of it. What's the word that we don't like to use, but we should?
Revenue.
No, it begins with C. Cash flow, yeah? All startup businesses are very, very, very dependent on the cash flows, because it's the cash flows, when the shop gets opened, the store, or when the hotel gets opened, or when it's the power station opening, yeah? Or a toll bridge, or a motorway, whatever project it is, it'll be repaid from the cash flows. So the second thing we're going to look at, so number one, we looked at the startup gearing, which was the debt to equity. So number two, what we need to look at is the cash flows. Everybody okay on that? Because there's a huge chunk of debt here, $30 million, and it's got to be repaid. Now the way we're going to look at this is by taking the developer's forecasts. Now this is where it gets quite complicated and it's a little bit difficult for me to try and do, you over 4,000 miles away. So what you're going to see is you'll see figures on the screen, but I'll have to try and rely on you, keeping a close eye on the figures in front of you there. Now, to make this a little bit more straightforward to begin with, is all we're going to look at to begin with is the first year, okay? So we're going to focus on the first year figures. Can everybody see? When we come to all of these figures, and it starts off operating revenues, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And the start year is 2006. And can you see there's room revenues, $9.9 million. There's some food revenues, telephone and other revenues. Now can you see the line to highlight is total revenue, and we're going to highlight that 17.5 million approximately. Yes?
Yes.
Now don't forget that's a forecast, and it's a forecast based on 55% occupancy, you remember, and $195 for the room rate. We're going to come back on those figures a little bit later. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because when you get forecasts, people do present them in different ways. If accountants have prepared them, quite often, the accountancy preparation will be different. So what we have to try and do as, risk managers is persevere and try and figure out what these figures are actually telling us. So we've got 17.5 million, what they're calling total revenues. So you could think of that as sales, yeah? So that's like sales or revenues from the hotel. So total sales of 17.5 billion. And then there are certain expenses that are directly related to those revenues. Now this is where it gets a bit tricky, because when we turn to the next page, which I don't want you to do yet, but when we turn to the next page, we're going to find a whole bunch of other costs. At the end of the day, we're always going to have, sales and then a lot of costs, aren't we, before we strike the profit. So it's a separation of costs that can be quite tricky, and that's the thing we have to try and persevere with. If we're not too sure, the advantage is, if we're sitting opposite the accountant, we can ask, or sitting opposite the developers, we can ask, but for the moment, we don't have that luxury, so we're looking at this ourselves. But what you can see is total operating expenses in the first year, look, 8.2 million. And if you take that 8.2 million away from the 17.5 million gross sales we had, with a bit of luck, you should get what they're calling gross operating income of 9.36 million. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Now then, to help your understanding, if you wish, you could write on that sheet where it says gross operating income, you could write gross profit, because that's similar to a business gross profit. So if we thought of our clothes store or our food store in Bay Street, we're going to have certain sales out of the store, we're going to have certain costs that are directly related to the sales in the store. If it's a food store, it's the food that's bought in. If it's a clothes, selling clothes, it's the clothes that's bought in. These are costs that are directly related to the sales, and generally in accountancy terms we take those away and we'd strike what we call a gross profit. In this particular case, the developers are calling this the gross operating income. Everybody okay so far? Mm-hmm. Now, a good mathematical calculation to do, because this is one of the few business ratios you can compare, is if we worked out the gross profit as a percentage of sales, we could then compare that with other hotels, where we can get our hands on the published figures. So if on the calculator we take 9360 and we divide that by the sales of 17568, and again we multiply by 100 to get it as a percentage, you should get 53%. Everybody get that? Try it again if you didn't get that. So 9360 is the gross operating income, or gross profit. Divide that by the sales of 17568, multiply by 100, and you should get 53%. Now, you know, I'm a terrible bad habit of making jokes about our American friends or your neighbours. Shouldn't do that. But here's a good thing that came out from the US. What the Americans tend to call this particular ratio is the contribution margin. So you could write that down as well. So we've got gross operating income, we're also calling it gross profit, and we can also call it contribution margin, and that's really good when you're talking about hotels and hotel financing. So what it means is on this particular 253 bedroom 5-star hotel, they've got a 53% gross profit or contribution margin. So you can say, well, what does that mean? Let's try and put this in plain language. What it means is for every $100 of sales out of this hotel, how many dollars are they getting contribution towards all of the other costs that we haven't looked at yet? What's the contribution? $53, isn't it? Or if you prefer, for every $1 of sales in this hotel, they're getting 53 cents contribution towards the remaining costs. Everybody okay with that? So again, this is basic, risk management talk that people should understand. So this is very, very important because it gives us the contribution towards the over costs. So let's turn the page and see what other costs are coming up. So what you can do to try and help yourselves, because again I'm quite a long way away from you, if at the top of the next page, you see where I'm resting my cursor now, you put that figure 9360, so carry it forward 9360 to the top of the next page. So write in there 9360, because then we've got some other costs to deduct. Now I know I'm going quite slowly on this cost bit, but it is important, as we'll see. So can you see there's another bunch of costs there, look. 493, 878, 439, 966. And if you add those four costs together, you should get 3777, yes? Just check that. Now you see I'm very cautious when I'm looking at figures. I like to check them, to make sure they're right, because $30 million loan requests is a lot of money. We want to be sure these figures add up. Everyone get 3777? Well, approximately. I get 310.6, is that right? Yeah. Okay, so if you take 3777 away from carry forward figure of 9360, you get what they're calling income before fixed charges. And again, here's a very strange terminology, GDP they're calling it, yes? 5583? Mm-hmm. So we're all correct so far. So just backtracking, we started on the first page with gross sales of approximately 17.5 million. Then we had 8.2 million of direct costs, giving us a contribution of 9.3 million approximately towards the other costs. So we turn the page, we've got more costs, 3777, and so far we've got 5583. And then can you see there's yet more costs put forward here, 527, 505, 175, 987, which they're calling them fixed charges of 1305. So if we take that 1305 away from 5583, we should get 4278. Now that 4278 is a very important figure for us, because if you look to the left of that, it says net oper into DS. Anyone figure out what that stands for? Yes, net operating income to DS. What's the S stand for? No.
Debt service?
Debt service, very good. So if you want to write that out a bit longer, it stands for net operating income to debt service. That's going to be a key figure for us as risk managers. That's suggesting a net operating income of just over $4 million to service the debt. So let's go forward, leave the next page. Let's go forward to the page that's headed up the town currency dollars debt section. Now what we're looking for is that figure of 4278. So can you see that? Look, net income before debt servicing.
Yeah.
Well done, very good. So highlight that 4278. Now, if that's going to service the debt, what will the debt be made up of? Bearing in mind it's a loan. There'll be an interest cost, and when you take a loan, what else? Interest and interest and repayment, so interest and capital, yes? So let's have a look at the calculation. So what we've got is they're suggesting debt servicing of $3.3 million. Where does that figure come from? Well, if we go up the page, you can see at the top of the page, look, there's the loan, $30 million. It's 11% fixed rate. So the interest expense is $3.3 million, yes? And you can see in the first year there's no repayment within this schedule. Now that's because that's what's being discussed with the developers. They're not offering a repayment in the first year, but can you see in the next year there's a repayment coming in at 260? Yeah. So the first year, in terms of debt servicing, because there's no repayment, the debt servicing is interest only of 300. So let's go down the page. We're finally coming to what I was looking for. So I said to you, what we're looking for, you know, are the cash flow ratios to illustrate the payback. So here we have, look, can you see that DS coverage ratio? Right on the bottom line, you need to highlight that. This is a very, very important risk ratio. So as risk managers, if within our institution's getting involved at all with new projects, this is a key ratio we want to see. So we want to see the starter debt to equity, which we've calculated, and this is the second key ratio we want to see, is the debt service coverage ratio. So here's the calculation, 4278 divided by 3300, and that should give you 1.3. Just check that on your calculator. Yeah, it's 1.296, so we'll call it 1.3, yes? Then if you want to calculate it just for the second year, just to check the second year we've got the net income forecasted 6010, so divide that by the debt service, which this time is the interest cost and the capital repayment, you should get 1.69. So according to the calculations we're looking at, can they cover the debt, yes or no?
No.
Why'd you say no?
Because if they're only paying the interest, and the interest is 3 point something and they're only making, they can pay it in the first year, but it's going to be
Correct.
increasingly difficult as they start to make principal payments.
Yes, it will be more difficult, which is why we'd have to look at the coverage ratio each year at the bottom. Can you see it's covered each year?
Yes?
Yeah. So according to the forecasts, they are able to cover the interest and the capital repayments. But what are these forecasts based on?
Occupancy, which isn't guaranteed.
Yeah, very good. So we go back once again to, I think it's the second page, bottom of the second page. There we are. Look. So these forecasts then, from a risk perspective, are based on occupancy, which is not guaranteed. But can you also see the occupancy is forecast to increase?
Yes.
Sounds right.
Yeah. And look at the room rate.
It's increasing as well.
Increasing as well. So as risk managers, these are aspects that we would want, our credit risk department to verify, yes? Would you agree? Yeah, agreed. So we've got two things. We've got a high level of startup gearing. Then we've looked at the cash flow ratios, which appear to be covered, but as you said, from a risk perspective, they're based on occupancy and based on occupancies increasing and room rates increasing. So that's the second point. Okay. Now the third mathematical point is a little bit more difficult, and this is where you're going to really have to, try and help each other and get right in on this. This is quite difficult to do, but what we're going to look at is, from a risk perspective, at what point in any startup business, from a risk perspective, a key risk thing is at what point will the business break even? Why do we want to know that? What is break even? By definition, break even in a business is what?
When your expenses and your income actually levels out, like they net out each other.
Very good. So break even is the point where the business makes no profit, but it makes no loss, because it's a point of balance, yes? When I did 2 lectures in St. Petersburg in Russia through Russian translators, in Russian there is no such thing as break even. You can't translate that word. So all the translator could do was translate the point of balance. So that's interesting, isn't it? In a huge state like Russia, there is no definition of break even. But the rest of us in the rest of the world, presumably even China, I didn't do break even in China when I worked there. Well, they don't break even in China, do they? Because they make big profits all the time. So I don't suppose break even they even think about. Okay, so what is the break even point from a risk perspective? So that would be an interesting calculation. Now, the chartered banker people in the UK, there are over 27 different break-even formulas, but the one we're going to use is a one that's recognised for use in banking, and it's quite straightforward. So what I'm going to give it to you, have to write this down because we don't have it on the screen. So the first formula that we're going to write down is break-even sales. So break-even sales equals fixed costs divided by the gross profit percentage. So it's quite a straightforward formula. Okay, so break-even sales equals fixed costs divided by the gross profit percentage. Now if you look at the first page of mathematics once again, and you look at that gross profit of 9360 that we have on the first page, and you divided that by the sales of 17568, you got gross profit percentage of 53%?
Yes.
Yeah? So you've got the denominator already for the formula, yeah? So all we need is the fixed costs. Now this is where we've got to be careful because of the separation of the costs. So to get the fixed cost, we need to turn the page. And you see that we've got some costs, you need to write this down. We've got some costs of 3777 in the first year. And then you've got other costs, remember, of 1305. So if you add those two together, you're going to get the total of the fixed costs. And I make that 5082. I'll just wait till you can verify that. Are you okay on that? So we're on that page. Help each other if you're sitting next to somebody and you're not too sure. Two people are working on this are better than just one. Everybody see that one? So we've got fixed cost, we've got costs 3777, yes? Then further down we've got costs of 13605. So if you add those together you get 5082. Okay, so what you've got then for your formula, break-even sales equals the fixed costs, which are 5082. So in the calculator put 5082, press divide, and then we're going to put in 53%, so you could enter 0.53, press equals, and I get break-even sales of 8.7 million, yeah?
Yes.
So let's call it 59589. Happy with that? So 9589. So what we're saying is this hotel, they're forecasting sales in the first year of $17.5 million, and we've calculated break-even sales of $9.5 million approximately. Now the second formula is where we slightly differ in Europe from the US. Now if this was the US analyst looking at this, what they would go on to for formula number 2, and we call it the same thing, we call it the margin of safety. So MOS, margin of safety, in this project. So the formula for margin of safety is the expected or forecast sales minus the break-even sales. So if you were looking as an American analyst, you would say, oh, the margin of safety is $17,568, because that's the forecast sales, minus our break-even sales of 9589. So let's have a look what that is. $7,979.
Trying to find out where you are.
17568, right? Is the forecast sales?
Forecast sales 17568, yes, in year 1. Minus the break-even sales that you just calculated of 9589. So what we've got is a margin of safety of $7.979 million, yeah? Approximately $8 million. So do you think that's quite a good safety margin? It is, isn't it? I mean, what we're saying is here's a hotel forecasting sales $17.5 million. They can slip back by approximately $8 million, and they're not going to make a loss, they're going to break even. Now, to me as a risk manager, that sounds too good to be true. I mean, that's a huge figure, isn't it? Now, what we would do in Europe is we'll just complete the second formula the way we would do it, because we like to do things in percentages. So all we need to do is that second formula where you've got margin of safety equals the forecast sales minus the break-even sales. To get it as a percentage, we're going to divide that by the forecast sales and then multiply by 100. So let's try that in the calculator. So we've got forecast sales 17568 minus break-even sales of 9589, and that equals 7979, yes? Then we're going to divide that figure by the forecast sales of 17568, press equals, and then multiply by 100. I get 45%, 45.4%.
Yes.
So again, that's a massive margin of safety, isn't it? You know, that's over 40% margin of safety, which sounds, you know, just too good to be true. Now, it is too good to be true. Can anybody figure out something that we've actually missed out? I did this deliberately for the reasons we're going to go on to discuss in terms of risk management, but can anybody think of a significant cost to the business that we haven't put into this calculation?
The expenses.
The expenses,
No, we put all the expenses in.
the loan payment,
Yeah, very good. The loan interest expenses, yeah? So we couldn't put in the loan repayments because they're capital, aren't they? But what we do need to put in is the loan interest costs, yeah? So what we've missed out in this break-even calculation is the interest costs. So what you need to do is write very, very clearly on your bit of paper, margin of safety 45%, excluding in capital letters, interest costs. So what we're going to do as a final calculation is we're now going to build in the debt profile, and you know, because of your startup debt equity gearing, remember that was very high, because, you know, we had a high startup debt gearing ratio, so the impact of debt should be significant on the break-even calculation. So let's see how significant it is. And then when we've done this, we're going to take a five-minute break. So what we need to do this time is, you've got the break-even sales, remember, equals fixed costs divided by gross profit percentage, yes? Now the gross profit percentage is going to stay the same, because that's just as we had it before. You know, it's the 9360 from the opening page of figures divided by the 17568. So we've still got the denominator at 53%, but what we need is the fixed costs, including the interest. So remember, we had fixed costs of we had fixed costs of 5082. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, 5082, and then we've got to turn the page to add in the interest cost. We've got to turn 2 pages till we get to the debt section. And there it is, look, in the first year, there's the interest cost, 3300. So, what I've got to do is add this 3300 onto my fixed cost of 5082, give me a new fixed cost figure of 8382. So we're going to put that in the calculator, 8382 divided by 0.53. Wow, that's a difference, eh? 15815 for break-even sales. So instead of sales breaking even around $9 billion, which is what we got first calculation, look at the impact of the debt. Break-even sales are 15.8 million. Everybody got that? And if we compare that 15.8 million with the projected sales, or the forecast sales, 17.5 million, you can see it's a lot tighter, isn't it? So let's work the margin of safety. So margin of safety equals the forecast sales, so in the calculator, 17568 minus the break-even sales, which this time are 15815. So that equals 1753. Everybody got that?
Yes.
Now we're going to divide that by the forecast sales of 17568. Press equals, and then multiply by 100. And I get approximately 10%. I get 9.98%. Yeah?
Yes.
Good. Now let's make sure everybody gets that, because this is so important from a risk perspective. So we'll just run through that again. So the fixed costs we had before were 5082, but we forgot to add in, and I deliberately did not add in the interest cost because I wanted to show the impact of the debt on this project. So if we add the interest cost of 3300 to our 5082, we get fixed costs of 8382, including the interest. And if we divide that by the gross profit percentage of 53%, we get break-even sales this time of 15815, which is much, much closer to the forecast sales of 17568. And if we complete the calculation for the margin of safety, we've got the forecast sales 17568 minus break-even sales 15815 divided by forecast sales 17568, and then times 100 I get 10%.
Yes.
Now, this is a key statistic. So we're now in a position where we could go back to the people in our institution, working on credit, or in fact we might be working on this credit proposal ourselves. But what we've identified is 3 significant risk stages. We've identified a high level of startup gearing, which is the debt to the equity, yes? We then identified, yes, there is cash flow coverage ratio, but that's based on the expected occupancy and the expected forecast room levels. And then the third calculation from a risk perspective is, well, yes, this project looks good because there's a margin of safety of 45%, but just a minute, when we build in this $30 million loan request, the margin of safety shrinks to only 10%. So what would your perception be as risk managers of a margin of safety of 10%? Is that good or is it bad?
That's bad to me.
Low risk or high risk?
High risk.
High risk, isn't it? Because it's only 10%. So what does that tell us about the project?
Risky.
Yeah, why is it risky?
that means if they fall off of their forecasted,
Because, right, if,
if they fall off their forecasted, profits by 10%, that means they won't
Yeah,
have
they've got a
sufficient.
problem, yeah, very good. Now why do they have a problem? What's causing the problem?
the occupancy, because they're doing it based on occupancy and you're not sure how to stress test that.
Correct, but
Let's start
with a
out.
big project,
The ratio, because of how
Yes.
much they need compared to how much they already have.
Yeah.
excellent, excellent, that's brilliant. So we actually work backwards on this project to illustrate that actually the startup position isn't what it should be. So you see, the developers could be saying, oh, well, you know, we're putting $13 million equity in, which sounds a lot of money, doesn't it? Yeah? You know, it's a lot of equity, $13 million. So we're only requesting a loan of 30 million. You know, we're putting in 13, so surely that would be okay. They could be saying to you, but you're saying, no, just a minute. As risk managers, you know, what we're worried about is this is too much debt, because if you do the mathematics to look at the startup finance position, the debt to equity looks very high. If you do the mathematics on the coverage ratios, yes, they're covered, but they're based on the forecasts. But then finally, if we return to something which is very, very basic in project financing, let's look at the break-even of this project, and let's look very importantly at the margin of safety. Do you realize the margin of safety in this project is only 10% when you forecast with all the debt included? So do you think that's a good assessment from a risk position?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay, so what we'll do is we'll take a 5-minute break while I make myself a quick cup of tea, and then we'll just pull this together and see where this would fit in, you know, with the SWOT analysis we've been doing on the hotel, and then we'll move on to some more of the risk slides, because we've done a good job on this hotel financing. So we'll just take a 5-minute break.
Yeah. You want to go to the woman? You don't have to get pasta. You want the key for the pasta? But you want the alarm cord? Isn't there an alarm on your side?
Is it chocolate, this one, chocolate? It's the, okay. Who's it?
No, he meant the something Monday going. He's looking back, yeah. No, what
No, it's
was?
Saturday and Sunday rainy and Monday sunny.
No, but it's not gonna be it.
The weather rain. That's the only thing I guess.
No. It's not this one. I don't know.
Yeah, we have something different like that too. Guys, you know, just
Is it going to hit now, somebody Monday, or just the
No,
Holiday
it's
General?
like slightly outside.
Means I sleep on Monday, I clean my house.
I said, we used to know say.
I have an Xbox I do, so I don't think it's up until that.
Really? I didn't include it.
I have to know one voice.
I think she doing, I see doing.
Can't do.
She's 17, she can also buy a time. This the oldest one you made? The youngest one? Okay. Yeah.
Remember this one like to spend the day at Breezes with some of our friends and it raining, so all I want to do is get my other decent hour, whatever. And when they off of school, ain't that much to do.
No.
And then I ready for work. She said, "When are you ready to go back?" I said, "Me too." When you ready, you go back to school.
It's still time.
No, UK school will open that in September.
Oh, yeah.
All you have is time.
Jesus. We got almost 2 months.
I know, right?
Yeah.
She's already
Feel like
accustomed to
you
being
can't
around one, so I'm like, look, you in my space. I ain't yours. You need to go alone. She came home in April, spent 4 weeks. She went back, and spent 3 weeks, did the exam and came back. There's their school semester is just retired.
Yeah.
She starts the end of September. She comes home for 4 weeks in December. Mid-December to mid-January.
So, man.
They don't feel 4 weeks, and then in the Easter she don't for 4 weeks. And when she goes back to the school for exams, and for exams only go over a period of a week or 2 weeks. That's what she needs to be there for, because they don't get their grades until weeks later.
Yeah.
They say they see the exams could be spread over a 6-week period. But usually for her, the school will always get the exams out early.
Okay.
Because of what they want international students who won't go back. She been off from Jordan.
Yeah.
You kill them?
I kill them.
You kill them? That's good. Just came back last night. That's appreciate that.
Yeah, customers in the next room.
Hmm? No, Fridays be slow.
No, Friday mornings, this week busy. Friday afternoon.
She know, yeah.
I love me some Miss Bell. Miss Bell is wicked. He's wicked like always.
Cross.
But just learn. Like I like
Learn
the
about
fact, yeah.
calling them late hours.
I know, he's telling you 8 to
And then
6.
meeting requests. it's on
And
a
if you come
Saturday,
late.
And it's on a
Oh my god, I
evening
came
time.
2 minutes late, 1 minute late to his meeting. I said his door at 1 minute after the time. He's like, so do you think I have time to waste? Meeting's cancelled. Try to reschedule. I could cry. Trust me, I ain't gonna late never again after that.
It's a hard task.
He is.
She's staying there?
But even working for the Swiss all of years.
Swiss. Credit Suisse.
Okay, you guys okay?
Yes.
Alright, so just a final bit on that. So, we're thinking here as risk managers, we've done the SWOT analysis. So just to sort of conclude on the case, we thought the location was quite good. People concerned have got good experience in construction. There's no record of flooding on the site. We were a bit worried in terms of the compensation being unknown if this lease clause was broken. But we definitely viewed the lease breakage as a threat to the project, so we're feeling that it is a very, very strong risk to the project, to our credit department. We were talking about the opportunity, for new business within the hotel, the threats of competition and possibly storm damage, etc. And in terms of doing some mathematical risk, we were concerned that the start of gearing was very high, very adverse. Cash flow ratios dependent on the occupancy and forecast room rates. And then the more worrying thing is when we looked at the margin of safety of the project without any debt, it was a huge margin of safety, 45%. But then when we factored the debt in, that margin of safety went from this very, very, very comfortable figure to quite an alarming figure of only 10%, which, working backwards, confirms, our initial analysis that we were worried about the debt to equity ratio, which is what you mentioned, 25 minutes ago. So we've come back full circle back to that as a risk. So we're not saying it's a risky project, all we're saying is that it's carrying too much debt, in our opinion, as risk managers. Now, what the optimum amount of debt would be relative to equity, is a calculation way beyond what we're able to do. So this would have to go back to the developers. Developers would need to meet with their accountants, and rework the figures, look at the debt profile, see if there's any opportunity for more equity to come in, etc., etc. But certainly as it stands at the moment, it's a high-risk project. We agree?
Yes.
What would you say would be a comfortable percentage if I was reviewing this?
What would you say?
What would you say would be a comfortable margin of safety?
Well, that's very difficult because it's just like gearing. There's no real benchmark. It depends on the other risks in the project. Yeah.
Okay.
But certainly, all I could say is certainly, 10% is a warning signal, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, 45% is extremely comfortable. So dependent on the people behind the project, dependent on who's going to manage the hotel, dependent on the staffing, etc., etc. We'd then be factoring the margin of safety in, as a figure. So I'm not ducking your question, but it's an extremely difficult question to answer mathematically, is what I'm saying, yeah?
Okay.
Some people might think, 20-25% is reasonable, but some people with more of a risk appetite might say, I'll go for 15 to 20, yeah? So it's going to come back to the commercial risk appetite of the institution. But certainly I would definitely not be comfortable with a 10% safety margin, and I don't think any of you would be either, and that was the kind of reaction that we're getting, yeah? Okay, let's take a look at some of the slides, see where we're up to. Oops. No, my slides have just disappeared. That's on me. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, so if you remember, we got as far as slide 34 on my slide. It's quite an easy one to find. It's that business checklist there, where we have the non-financial analysis. So it's probably about halfway through. Everybody found that one? And if you found it and your neighbour hasn't, help your neighbour there, you buddy. So what we're saying then is, yes, the mathematics are tough, but when we cross to this qualitative, subjective, non-financial side, it's difficult. And again,